very interesting with John. We Neil, myself, and Brendan were very lucky when we arrived in America in April last year. RJ doesn't normally deal with clients, but John was actually out of town presenting in Canada. And so RJ, we jumped in the car with RJ, and we had a real authentic experience because they analyze about 5,000 properties a month. Then they go to the auctions. They've got 6 people looking at the properties prior to the auctions. Then RJ drives around and looks at between 30 and 50 properties per day, and 8 days prior to the auctions, and then they actually go and buy the properties on the auctions. And to be honest, you can imagine, if you're looking at 30 to 50 properties, I personally have probably looked at now well over 150 to 200 properties personally. So I've got a very good feel. And when we start talking about valuations and everything, I've been inside the properties just prior to the thing. You can ask Henny about it. I don't know if it's a fun day or not. You start at 7 o'clock in the morning, you get home at 10 o'clock at night, and you're literally walking in and out of a property, and you're spending like 5 minutes in that property, in, out, in, out. This guy is incredibly efficient. He owned over 350 properties himself. But the one thing with him is that he's got ADHD. And as he says, he's got ADHD in HD, which means attention deficit disorder in high definition. Okay. And so, we actually we decided it would probably be better for John to come out, because RJ would be talking, telling you about the Atlanta market, and the next thing would be, should we go play some golf? And then he'd go back and he just loses his train of thought. And to be honest, John is, we believe that John is actually the more intelligent of the 2 business partners. He's much more scientific, much more pragmatic, and most importantly can take us through in terms of what is actually happening. So, but with regards to John, I think who's heard of Brian Tracy? Anyone? Okay, John is currently writing a book with Brian Tracy, and what they're looking at is how the funds are buying properties in America, and he's trying to teach people to do what the funds are doing so that they can get the same results as the funds. Who would like to know that? Okay. Secondly, John has been investing in property in America and helping other investors for 17 years, so he comes with a huge amount of experience. I will say this, and this is, I think, a huge testament to John. Henny, my business partner, has invested all over the world. Well, I don't know about all over the world, but certainly a lot internationally. And one of the things that we learned off Warren Buffett was that if you're going to invest, don't actually pay someone to tell you why not to invest. And after Henny came with me for about 2.5 weeks and we ran around America, he decided on behalf of Wealth Migrate that John would probably be our best person to do the due diligence so that we didn't make any mistakes in terms of the property. So without further ado, I'd like to call upon John. He comes with a huge amount of experience, and I look forward to him sharing what exactly is happening in the market, both from a macro and a micro point of view. So thank you, John.
The appetants in the room. Hoya, better. I wanted to nail that. You should have saw me like a little school kid pacing up and down the hallway. Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon. So anyway, I'm really excited that I get to talk to you today, because I'm going to... Hello? Okay. So I'm really excited to talk to you today because not only am I going to talk about Atlanta, I got some sugar up here for you. I think you call it chocolate. We're going to talk about Atlanta, but I'm also going to give you the macro perspective, what's happening in the United States, and we're going to talk about what implications that has to your investments going forward for growth potential, for the rents, the consistent cash flows, and so forth. And when I talk about this stuff, I was telling Henny, it's kind of like my son. He's 10 years old. And for the longest time, he wanted a Nintendo Wii. You guys have a Nintendo Wii? Okay. So he has a Nintendo. I don't want to make assumptions. So he wanted a Nintendo Wii for the longest time. And there are a lot of games I don't want him playing and so forth, but I finally agreed to it. And in America, they intentionally cut off supply right before Christmas to give you a reason. It's really smart to give you a reason to go shopping in January, because you promised your kid an Xbox, it's sold out, you buy him a bunch of stuff, and then in January and February, hey, what about the promise you made about the Xbox? So now you got to go buy an Xbox, and that's how they keep you going through the first quarter of the following year. So I got him the Wii, and I put it under the Christmas tree, and I'm just so anticipating opening that up with him. And when Christmas time comes, we unpack it together. He's all excited, and I just feel good inside. And I feel the same way about the material you're about to hear in the United States, because I'm going to take the unfiltered, just the raw information that you're going to need to apply to making money in the United States. And there's a lot of information out there on what we're going to do today, just because I know it's a little bit later in the afternoon, and I know maybe there's some blood sugar that's a little bit low. I'm going to bribe you to play with me with chocolate. And so these are just not your regular candy bars, though. These are worth 1,000 Rand. Because if you purchase in Atlanta, for every one of these wrappers you bring me, the ones I throw out today, not the ones you buy at the grocery store, we'll take $100 off, 100 US dollars off your purchase price, okay? So, and I do this not just for the fun of it, but because in any kind of education environment, it's not enough just to get wet with the information. Learning is defined as a change in behavior. So if we're just getting wet with the information, we can't apply it in any way, it doesn't change our thinking, then it's useless. So this will help us internalize it. So we'll have an exchange and more of a conversation than anything else. Is that cool? Okay.
Just before he gets started, because he's about to get serious. And no, but seriously, this is, John, just tell us about your first experience of meeting a South African, because this is priceless.
I don't know if you don't want to hear this story. Okay, so this is actually funny. It goes 2 years ago when I had never dealt with a South African before. All I knew about South Africa was Nelson Mandela. Now I know twice as much because there's Oscar in the picture. And congratulations to South Africa. That's your gift to the universe. And you're going to be plagued by jokes, dead, tired jokes about Oscar everywhere you vacation now around the world probably, right? So anyway, I was working with a South African from Joburg, and he was Afrikaan, and we got to know each other over Skype. And I live in Orlando, which Scott failed to mention. I'll tell you why I'm playing in Atlanta even though I live in Orlando. But he wanted to come over to Orlando, take a look at some properties. And we had some conversations over Skype. We were pretty friendly with each other. And so he shows up, and the plan for the day was that I was going to go pick him up at his hotel, and we were going to look at houses together. So I show up to his hotel. I get out of my car. I'm walking around my car, and he's coming towards me, and we're about to greet each other for the first time. And he goes, how's it, China? And so I'm like, what are you, an asshole? I don't even know you. And so he explains himself, and we're like we're best friends to this day. So that was my first experience, and but really cool guy, and I love Afrikaans. So and I love your country, by the way. You've been here for like 5 days, and the food, the culture, the people in general, and I'm looking forward to really having a reason to come back. The wine doesn't like me very much here. We went to, if I could tell the story real fast, we went shark cage diving, and that was the morning after I had my bout with your wine. And I had a pretty spiritual experience the next day as I'm leaning over the hole with my own chum line feeding the sharks. And I'm praying to God, make the pain go away. I won't drink again, I won't drink again. But that was like 5 days ago, 5 or 6 days ago. Yeah, so anyway, so back to real estate. So we're going to talk about Atlanta cash flow properties. In the United States, being that I'm in Orlando, I have 2 real estate companies in Orlando that serve international investors. We were kind of forced in that position because in Orlando, we're in an international market. We have a lot of investors coming from all over the world, Brazil, Israel, the UK, of course, all through Europe, South Africa, Asia. And we see a lot of investors making a lot of costly mistakes. How you doing, Linda? I didn't realize you were here. We see a lot of them making a lot of costly mistakes in the US. So we had to put together a holistic solution for investors coming from abroad that encompass more than just a transaction. Because when you go into the US right now and you're working with local estate agents or real estate agents, they'll help you facilitate the purchase, but they typically don't know anything beyond that. That includes even breaking down the cash flow of a house, a very simple formula like that. Not to mention the rehab, the renovation, property management, everything that goes along with it. So we had to put all of that together. So really, your house purchase is 1/3 of the equation. That's where 1/3 of the due diligence goes in your attention, your focus. The other third is property management. And then the other third is all the logistics, taxation, ownership structures, avoiding the FERPTA withholding and all that kind of stuff. So we had to put all of that together, and it just was an arena I love to play in, and we brought that up to Atlanta because we saw the same need up there. To give you some context, we are turning about 30 to 40 houses a month in Atlanta. One of our customers is the equity funds. So they're buying the properties after we acquire them, we clean up title. We don't even have to put property management in place because they have their own property managers, which is great because it doesn't tax all of us in this room when it comes to our property management resources, but they want the house completely renovated, tenant friendly. That poses a very unique problem for the individual investors like you and me, because it's very hard to source, it's very hard to justify sourcing properties for individual investors who take twice as long to close on a property, pay a little bit less money than what the funds are paying. But we've deliberately made the decision to not veer away from the individual investors. We could have, probably about 6 months ago when the funds started coming into the picture, just completely sold everything off to the funds because it's a very easy job. Selfishly speaking, though, as a business, it wouldn't make sense because if their strategy changes, then we're kind of left high and dry in our market. So we continue to cater to individual investors. IPS is one of 4 groups that we continue to play with today, and I'm going to talk about that, the why behind that in a little bit, okay? But we have a lot of international investors buying in the US, some of them for different reasons than you're doing. You've already heard about Warren Buffett, the Warren Buffett story. When he publicly proclaimed single-family homes as an attractive asset class, everybody started coming into the market, including Wall Street. And I'll talk about the implications of that. That's the most important part of this conversation we're going to have here. The important thing about this, though, outside of what he said that drew all the attention to single-family homes, was that when we made the decision to help individual investors, we didn't want to just bring you the cheapest properties with the highest paper yields. We wanted to create a model that was sustainable, that would attract and create champions out there that would talk about the program, because sales and marketing, if you're a sales and marketing company, you're always going to be a sales and marketing company. If you're a fulfillment and service company, you're going to generate referrals and the company will feed itself, and it's sustainable, and that's what we were after. So all the decisions we made about the type of homes we're going to purchase, the property management decisions, how we're going to structure the lease, how we renovate the homes, were of a different caliber because we're catering, again, to safety more than financial performance. Does that make sense? It's a really important distinction, and I just want to set that framework before we go forward. You're going to see what that looks like when it comes to how your leases are structured and so forth. So when you're building investments for safety, there's three legs of the stool. Does anybody know, for our first candy bar here, what the Pareto principle is? Pareto principle. I saw the hand in the very back. Okay. Oh. Fabulous. Okay, so the 80-20 rule says that 20% of your focus, the research that you do, the actions you take, behaviors you have, account for 80% of your results. So what I'm going to show you here is I'm going to unpack the 20% of what's going to create 80% of your results, 80% of the safety when it comes to investing in the United States. But you have to begin with the end in mind. We have a lot of investors with a very short-term focus, very myopic approach to buying real estate, and they're only considering either what their income is now, or maybe they're just buying for growth and they're compromising income, and then they have no consideration of how they're going to get out of the house. So we start with our exit strategy, and that creates a completely different picture than if we're starting with growth. RJ Polano, to give you an idea who Scott was talking about earlier, RJ has over 30 years in real estate. He personally owned 350 houses himself at one time. He is a coach, he's an author, he speaks to property managers to teach them how to set up their leases and how to do property management correctly when it comes to tenant screenings and so forth. And I met RJ about 1.5 years ago at an international real estate conference where he was talking to some property managers, He and I were the only ones that were playing in Atlanta at the time. And the group that I was doing consulting for in Atlanta were buying really cheap properties. They had outstanding operation, outstanding property management. But when you're buying cheap houses, there's a type of tenant that you're going to attract, and there's some things that are outside of your control. And that's not fun when you're working with investors from California and other remote parts of the US or from abroad. And so I saw the writing on the wall. It wasn't going to make sense for international investors, at least for a sustainable model. And I aligned myself with RJ. And what I did for RJ, because I had the international audience attention, was I had relationships with about 20 Scots out there. And we brought those relationships to the table, and they were our partners for probably the first year. The funds came into the picture, like I already talked about, and it made it so much easier. If we would have taken the path of least resistance, we would have just catered completely to the funds. But instead, we said, you know what, let's just pare down the 20 partners that we have out there internationally, just down to 4 of them. And IPS was one of them. One of the companies is out of Israel. One of them is in the United States that caters to American investors trying to take possession and control of their retirement savings and own and carry real estate inside of their retirement structures. And then we have one in Asia or Australia. It's the same group. And then we have IPS. The unique thing about IPS is that none of the other partners, the other 3, have an exclusivity in their regions, their geographic areas. IPS is the only group that we've actually agreed to, you know what, there's a lot of people from South Africa that want to play with us, but we're not as comfortable with their values and their service model, so we offer them a complete exclusivity with us. And that says probably a lot about them, more so than even the sticks and bricks stuff that you're seeing up here. Because when we put them through the coals, we were looking more for the soul of the company. And that's an intangible that you just can't see with houses. We wanted to know if someone got into trouble, are they going to answer a phone? Because in the international environment, there's a lot of short-sighted people, as you can suspect. And I think even in South Africa, where people get burned, they want an answer, or they want someone to help them, and they're kind of left high and dry, and we didn't see that. So that's why we partnered with them. More of the team. We're based out of, actually, Tampa. I live in Orlando. Some of our team is in Tampa, but operationally with the property manager and the rehab teams, and then RJ spending about 3 weeks in Atlanta a month, everything runs out of Atlanta, but all of our accounting and so forth is back office. If you own a property with us, the person that you're going to deal with most is Anthony. He lives in Atlanta. We went through one property manager the first 30 days we were there. They didn't respect our money. They were placing bad tenants, so we fired them. We tried to outsource to another property manager the second 45 days, and we fired them as well. Finally, RJ made the decision we have to bring our property manager from Florida up to Atlanta and keep that in-house. And so that's what we've done. And that's Anthony and his family. So we talked about RJ. We had about 2,000 transactions last year. It looks like we're going to do, I'm sorry, not last year, but during his lifetime, 400 last year. And it looks like this year we're going to do double that, mainly for the funds. The investors that we serve are financially driven investors. There's 2 mindsets you can go into the United States with to do your due diligence and to buy properties. Any of you in here, by show of hands, does anybody have an idea of, before you came here, of a geographic location or a city that you were planning on buying in? Just name out some of the cities. I'm sorry? Dallas, can you pass this to her? Where? Atlanta? Why Atlanta? Why Atlanta? Okay. Thank you.
Grand Junction.
Where's Grand Junction? Is that in Florida? Grand Junction? Where's Grand Junction?
I don't remember the state, but it's Arizona.
Oh, Arizona. Okay. Okay. So, typically when you're coming in the United States, a lot of international buyers, they have family members. They've worked in a certain city before. They may be a vacation in a city before. That's why your Phoenixes, your Palm Springs, your Orlandos, your Miamis, the market corrected very quickly in those cities because there was a lot of national demand and there was a lot of international demand. And so that's why I'm not operating in Orlando, because I don't like to work as hard as Jeff and Ray do to find deals. We can't do volume in Orlando. It's very hard to find the yields and as good an area when you're doing volume. So we had to inconvenience ourselves. Now I'm up there 2 weeks out of a month away from my family because that's where our investors, we feel, are better served, at least with the volume that we have to deliver to these funds and to individuals. That's why we're up there. But when you're looking at properties, if you're doing your due diligence as an end user, you can make mistakes. If you're doing your due diligence as a financially driven investor, where cap rates, numbers are most important to you, then you're going to be a little bit safer. Because if you're looking through the lens of a financially driven investor, there are certain things that you're asking that an end user is not asking. Interestingly, if you buy properties like an investor, even for end user experience, then you're going to be safe. But if you try to do it the other way around, you have geographic areas and you're not asking the right questions, but you're trying to play for capital growth and or cash flow, then you can get yourself into some trouble. Does that make sense? So there's two ways to buy in the US. You can go into the kitchen yourself and you can bake your own cake. You can find a real estate agent, you can find property managers, you can find rehab teams and do that yourself. All of our investors, we're just delivering the baked cake. And the baked cake looks like this. You've heard it from the other two groups, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. There are just a couple little distinctions here that are different. We're, of course, buying the properties. We're cleaning title, getting rid of any of the liens or clouds on the property. We're doing the renovations. We have 6 renovation teams running around 9 different counties, turning about 30, 40 houses a month. And we're letting go of the bottom renovation team every single month and bring a new one on board, because we have to manage the costs and we also have to make sure that there's an accountability to continue delivering good work for us. And it's very hard to do that in any country. The lease options, all of our properties are lease optioned. We do that not to create an exit strategy for the house, for you. We do that to attract an owner-minded tenant. So while some people will set up a rent-to-own situation to offer the tenant because they want to sell the house later for a predetermined purchase price, we're only doing it because we don't want tenants who rent houses with the expectation they're going to be there for 12 months and may or may not renew the lease. They're kind of transient-minded. They don't take care of the property. They don't have pride. So we want the owner-minded tenant. Less than 8% historically of our renters have ever exercised that option to buy. And that's the goal. We don't want to sell the houses. We want to keep them long-term, both personally and for our investors. We have a home warranty on the property. The home warranty covers you for 12 months. If any major system or appliances goes out, then we will take care of that out of our pocket. An example of that happening is when we buy a house, the first person that goes to the house is a home inspector. That's after we've purchased it, because prior to purchasing it, we already have kind of a list. We kind of know visibly what's wrong with the house. So we know what our renovation costs, for the most part, look like. The inspector goes there to look for the invisible stuff that we might have missed. And then we have the renovation teams go through. We fix everything the home inspector finds and that we found. Then at the end of the renovation, the home inspector has to go back to make sure that the renovation team finished everything before we write their check for their second payment. And then when everything's good, we're out of there. But it's been pest control treated. We've had the AC unit serviced. We've had it home inspected by that point, and that's what you're getting. And the renovation standards are a little bit higher than your average rental property, which anybody who's been to Atlanta can attest to that. The landlord protection program, that is, how many investors do we have in the room? This is a really interesting question for me. How many of you own properties here in South Africa? That's a pretty good amount. See, that's one of the reasons we work with IPS, because we have a much more educated buyer, a more sophisticated buyer, and that's something that we appreciate. How many of you that just raised your hands saw the inside of your property in the last 6 months? Pretty good number of you. How many of you see the inside of your property 2 times a year on a regular basis? That's awesome. Man, that's awesome. Let me give you a couple chocolates here. You know, that's rare. Normally we don't see that. What we do with the landlord protection program in the United States, it's illegal just to kind of arbitrarily go into a tenant's house. But we at the same time want to know that they're taking care of the property and that they don't have a lot of family members that they just all of a sudden invited to the house that aren't on the lease. So with the landlord protection program, which is an option for the landlords, the investors with us, most of them take advantage of it, we will go into the house 3 times a year. Every 4 months, we go into the property, we take 4 pictures for you, front, back, and sides of the house. In the lease, in the beginning, we set the expectation that we have to go make sure the fire extinguisher is charged. We have to make sure that the air filter is changed in your AC unit or your heating unit. That also protects you because most tenants won't do that, and then it damages the unit. And then the third thing that we're doing is checking the batteries and the smoke detectors for safety reasons. But that's a layer of accountability for the tenant. They're not going to let the property manager in the house and see a nasty house at the same time. So that's just one thing that we're doing that just kind of goes above and beyond for property managers. And then everything we hold inside of a land trust, which aligns well with your LLC structure in the United States, and that's for added discretion. So no one can search you in the public records, whether for tax reasons or otherwise, to see what assets you have. And I can talk to you more about that if you're purchasing in Atlanta. National ERA Servicing, we saw the video that said "Got Our Home," and you heard Anthony Salmieri talking in the beginning. That was our management company. That was Anthony talking on that video. We do an eviction guarantee, which is accountability on our part to make sure we place a really good tenant. I spent a lot of time on property management because, again, that's one of the 3 buckets on our due diligence. When it comes to eviction guarantee, what that says is that if you're an investor, you purchase a house with us, we place a tenant, and in the first 12 months they don't pay their rent, and we have to evict them, we will absorb the administrative costs and the legal fees to get them out of the house. And in Georgia, it takes anywhere from about 4 to 6 weeks to do that. But that's our responsibility in the first 12 months because we felt like we could have done something maybe a little bit better. One of the things I'm going to point out here that's pretty unique, when we're doing our tenant screenings, is we do a surprise visit. How many of you screen your own tenants? You're managing your own properties. See his hands again? I'm going to try not to hit anybody with chocolate. So you're not going back. And we have one more over here. I hope some of you aren't raising your hands and you don't even own a house. Okay, so when we screen our tenants, we do our credit checks, we do our background checks, your traditional checks, right? Income validation. But there's something that we do that is kind of the art behind property management, and not every property manager will do this. There's something you have to understand about property management. Any Peter Drucker followers in here? Anybody follow Peter Drucker, guru of business management in the United States? One of the things he says is compensation drives behavior. If you don't have a compensation model that drives the absolute best behavior and attracts the best people, then you don't have anything that's sustainable. And what we do with property management in the United States is typically you're paying a property management fee of 8 to 10%, 12%, and you pay, when a tenant is placed, they're keeping half of the first month rent or the first full month rent. That's the only money they make, unless they make a kickback on maintenance issues, and then you have a conflict of interest, right? Because you don't want your property manager making money every time something goes wrong with your house, which is something that we don't do, by the way, and that's something you have to be very careful of as an international investor. There's a lot of international clients that are hiring property managers that own maintenance companies, or they charge you every time they got to change a light bulb. And that's really important. We don't do that. We pay our property management team above and beyond the fees that they're collecting by servicing your house, because we own the management company. If you don't own the management company, you can't offer that compensation. And we also don't manage any houses that we don't acquire and renovate to that very specific rehab, and that aren't under the 3-year lease, the 3-year lease option arrangement. If it's outside of that very specific model, we don't touch the house. So it's very controlled. And that creates some economies of scale for our investors. Let's imagine that you have, the #1 turnover cost is what? With your house. When you have turnover, what's the most expensive part of that? It's interest. What if you're not financing? It's your renovation, right? So when we're renovating our houses, what's nice is all 6 rehab teams use the same paint color. We use the same carpeting. We use the same padding. We use the same epoxy paint in the garage floors. and the same garage door openers. So what's nice about that is if you have one wall when your tenant leaves, let's say in 3 years, you got to paint one wall. You don't have to color match the whole house and repaint the whole thing. You just paint that one wall because we have that for you. Or you replace one section of carpeting and so forth. So it's really, you have to kind of have a paradigm shift. You're not buying a house. You're buying a system. Our property management company also fields about 2,500 inbound phone calls a month on tenant leads. It's very easy. We can put a tenant in your house in 5 seconds. The hard part is separating the wheat from the chaff to make sure that we have a very good tenant in your house. That's why it takes anywhere from 3 to 6 weeks on the long side to get somebody in there. That's a very good owner-minded tenant. The surprise visit, oh, I forgot to mention this. A surprise visit, after we do the 5-point check, we'll call the tenant. We'll tell them that there's one more thing that we have to talk about. Can you speak at about 8 o'clock tonight or whatever time? They'll agree to it. They think they're going to get a phone call, and then we physically show up to their house. And you know what we're looking for? We're looking in their cars. We're looking at the grass. We're looking to see what kind of pets they really have. And we're looking inside their house when we talk to them. We just denied a tenant we did the 5-point check with. Everything checked good. We show up to their house. Their grass is up to our knees. They had 3 dogs in the backyard that they didn't tell us about. And they had a bicycle in the house that was tracking mud on the carpet in the living room. And so we denied them the opportunity to move into one of our houses. And I don't tell you that to share a tactic so much as to give you an idea of the mindset behind the property management group. Does that make sense? It's more important than just tactics. 1-year home warranty we talked about. A lot of the stuff that I'll miss on this conversation here is on your USB. So when you get back, you'll see a folder that says Atlanta in your USBs. You can go in there, and there's a lot more documents there and videos and so forth of what we're doing in Atlanta. Does anybody know what this is? No, not just the map. What map specifically? What's it? Okay, Democrats versus Republicans, right? Now, who watched the 2012 presidential election? Is that important over here? You guys watched that, right? Here's what's interesting. With 80% accuracy, you can see, I'm getting into our due diligence. I'm pulling back the curtain. I'm showing you the magic sauce for these hedge funds, how they find the best markets to invest in. And this is really important. With 80% accuracy, and I just accidentally stumbled upon this because I started to see a pattern. In the United States, this is the fastest way to determine if the state that you're about to invest in is a pro-tenant state or a pro-landlord state. Does that make sense? So, if you look on the map here, California, a Democratic state, liberal state, very tenant-friendly, good tenant protection laws. It can take up to about 6 to 8 months to evict a tenant if they want to battle you on it. And I don't have to tell you about that here, right? If you go to Michigan, Detroit, we made the mistake of buying a portfolio of homes all across the country, different property managers everywhere. One of them was in Detroit. Took us 8 months to get a tenant out of there. And one of the pipes broke. It's in the frozen tundra up north, and it filled up halfway. It was like an ice box. If the walls fell down, you'd have a big block of ice with pipes sticking out of it. And so we got rid of that. We don't touch Detroit, Pennsylvania. Yeah, these are all Democrats. So there's Detroit, Michigan. There's California. There is Massachusetts, another pain in the rear. So everybody that you see today are in capitalist states. They're in landlord-friendly states. The red states are conservative, capitalist states. And again, this is a generality, but it's a good place to start, to at least do your due diligence and then interview property managers on the ground. But you have Tennessee, Memphis. You have Atlanta, Georgia. Here's where Atlanta is. And then you have Florida in Orlando. And it's not a conversation about politics. I'm not saying that liberals and entitlement thinking are destroying our country. This is just a conversation about conservative, landlord-friendly states or pro-tenant-friendly states. You guys missed that. You got that? I'm on a downhill slide. My best material was like in the first 5 minutes. So. Okay, so the Atlanta market. The reason we're in Atlanta, here's the quick of it. if you've been in the United States, you've traveled around a little bit, you've probably flown through Atlanta. The airport in Atlanta is the #1 most trafficked airport in the United States when it comes to travel. So it's the travel hub of the Southeast U.S. It is the business hub of the Southeast U.S., and it is the economic hub of the Southeast U.S. To put that into perspective for you, if we cut the country in half vertically, and then we cut it in half again horizontally, and we pulled this part of the country out and made it its own country, you realize that would be the 4th largest GDP in the world, behind the rest of the United States, behind China, and behind Japan. That would be its own country. And that was almost like what they tried to do during the Civil War. But Atlanta, Georgia is the economic center of that hub. It's like the Tokyo of that Japan. If you've never been there before, it was the fastest growing metro statistic area of the 340-some in the whole US. It grew by 1 million people from the year 2000 to 2010. There's about 5.5 million population in the greater Atlanta market. The economic base is very wide, so we're not hinging on one industry or one sector or 1 or 2 companies. You have a lot of different companies representing a good cross-section of industry, and a lot of those brands here, they're all headquartered in Atlanta. It hosts about a presence of 75% of the Fortune 500 companies in the United States. This is a chart from the Census Bureau from 2010, because we want to see what the future is going to look like. From 2010 to 2020, it's going to grow twice the national average. The national average is about 9% per year is how fast these MSAs grow in population. Atlanta is about 20% projection. So it's a fast-growing city, and the reason is because of 2 things. The cost of living, it's about 6% lower than the national average, and you have very comfortable climates. So similar to Florida, your year-round temperature is about 72 degrees year-round. I think that translates to like 22 Celsius. That's pretty comfortable, right? So you have all 4 seasons. They're very mild seasons, very distinct seasons, but you're not shoveling snow or scraping ice in the wintertime. So it's attracting a lot of baby boomers from the Northeast, and it's also attracting the most important demographic is the young, educated worker, the college graduate age 22 to 28. They make 13% more in Atlanta than anywhere else in the country, yet the cost of living is lower than the rest of the country. That's why you have a lot of people migrating from the Rust Belt states like Detroit and Illinois and so forth. They're coming down south to places like Atlanta to work. Affordability is the most interesting factor of all of them. If you're going to pick a market to invest in, when it comes to affordability, you're looking for high rents, right, relative to purchase price. That's one factor. That's kind of like your obvious affordable factor. Affordability to me tells me how high, what kind of growth potential do we have in the market, and how hard is the floor. I want a very hard floor, but I want a soft ceiling for safety, and then for growth potential, for greed, essentially. So what we're looking for is we're looking for markets where the incomes are really high in that locale relative to the purchase prices. So forget about rents for a second. Historically in the United States, home prices, median home price, has been about 3.5 times your local income. You have exceptions to that rule in California and New York, where it's 5 or 6 times local income, and they're stretching it. But do you know what the prices were relative to income in places like California, Phoenix, and Florida back in 2006, the peak of our market? Somebody want to take some guesses? 8 times? We had prices that were 12 to 13. People were borrowing 12 to 13 times their income to buy homes. So now what happens is the more you stretch that rubber band, the harder it snaps back. And interestingly, you see that pattern. Where people were over-leveraging the most, you saw the biggest correction in price. That's why you had Nevada, California, and Florida as the top 3 foreclosure states in the country, and the biggest rebound from 2006. Does that make sense? So, was 2006 necessarily a good price to indicate future values? Probably not. The worst question you can ask coming in the United States, and it's the most popular question, interestingly, is what did this home sell for back in 2006 at peak? Everybody wants to know that, right? As if that was some indicator. So if you had 2 kids, 2 grade school kids, they were selling candy bars. And one kid was selling candy bars for 50 cents, and then the other kid was selling the candy bars for $1. But this kid was letting you finance them. You only gave me a nickel now, and then you can pay me the 95 cents at the end of the semester. Who's going to sell more candy bars? It's going to be the finance kid that appeals to our short-sighted nature. But at the end of the semester, he's not going to be able to collect. But it doesn't, and he's going to go out of business like you saw so many banks do. That's kind of our debt crisis in a nutshell. But the $1 that he was selling them for, that he sold so many candy bars for, has no it is not representative of what the true value of the property is, right? So that's the way you need to look at real estate. So how do you determine if you're getting a true intrinsic value or not? If you're getting really under an intrinsic value, kind of like when you're evaluating stocks, the PE ratio kind of gives you an idea, right? What is the equivalent in real estate? Replacement cost. I'll get you, I'm not going to try throwing it at you. I'm going to get it to you later, Lauren. So we have, what is the replacement cost of the property? What does it cost to build a property new in the US? When you consider the cost of land, entitlements, horizontal infrastructure, water, power, sewer, roads, street lights, the entry monument at the front of the community, the gatehouse, vertical construction of the house, the house, labor, materials, the resale cost, the builder's profit, sales commissions, price per square foot, if just throw some numbers out there, what do you think that is in the United States? $1,000? Well, let's talk per square foot. And I know that might be an unfair question because you talk in square meters. So it would be about $1,000 per square meter in the United States. So it's $100 a square foot in the US to build that brand new for all of that considered. So if we're buying real estate at $50, $60 a square foot, that's one indication. It's just a matter of time as supply is absorbed, that gap closes between the price per square foot on your resale property and what it costs to build new. What's another indicator of value? How many commercial investors do we have in here? Oh, no commercial investors. We have one. We have two. Three. How is commercial real estate valued? It's reverse engineered because of the income. So it's a cap rate. That's what establishes the value of a property that produces income. Here's what's interesting in the United States. We've all seen Case-Shiller index median home prices in the US. You look in any newspaper, when they report what the median prices are doing in the United States, they're always reporting what the aggregate does in total. There is a different personality in real estate between what investors are buying when it comes to residential houses and what the country is doing as a whole. So you have your end user, owner occupant product over here that is typically $150,000 or more. And then you have your investor product over here, which is purchased for income. When it comes to those two camps, you might have a very soft market on this side. You have a very competitive market with the investor type product, but you don't get the whole picture because they combine both when they tell you what median home prices are in the United States and what's happening. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to show you what's happening in that investor-related type product for $150,000 and lower, because it has a complete different personality than what you're seeing on end-user product for what people are buying to live in. And in this camp, with $150,000 lower prices that are appealing for cash flow, your price ceiling is dictated more than anything else by the cap rate. Because in the United States, the historic cap rates for landlord-type properties, your yield has been about 4, 5, 6% on the high side. That's what we're used to seeing. What we have now with double-digit returns and 9 and 10%, that's unusual. What you see in Australia and what you see in Israel and what you see in Canada right now, that's more the norm. Okay? We have opportunity because of that spread. Does that make sense? And we're going to talk about what the institutions are doing right now, because they're taking advantage of that spread. So when it comes to our criteria in Atlanta, I'll blast through these real fast to give you an idea of what we're looking for. When it comes to the geography, we found a good, from macro fundamentals, all the research points to Atlanta as a good, safe market for long-term growth. And again, we're not looking for hit home runs, double our money with the growth. We're looking for a place where we have no risk, downside risk, or as little as possible. So we're looking for safe places to buy. In the middle of the city, inside of 285, that circle, you have kind of a hit or miss area. You have, it's the oldest part of the city. You have old houses. You have new houses that have been rehabbed. You have good crime on one street, bad crime on the next street. We stay away from that. It's too inconsistent. We stay away from the north part of Atlanta where Marietta and Alpharetta are. because the houses are just really nice. It's more of an end user environment. The prices are high, the relative rents aren't as high, and you have low yields. We stay away from the bottom of Atlanta because that's where Clayton County is and DeKalb County. You have high crime, you have bad school districts, and you kind of have that speckled throughout everywhere else. But for the most part, we know where those areas
Sorry, John,
are.
can you just go back one step?
Yeah.
So this beautiful Clayton County and DeKalb County have been downgraded on the education system. It's only happened 4 times in American history. What is it you said?
Three times in American history.
3 times in American history. Now, if you're a tenant, forget about if you're a homeowner. If you're a tenant, do you want to live in Clayton County? Because this is not like Joburg where you can live, here or anywhere you want and send your kid to Saints. If you don't live in the right suburb, and Ray spoke about earlier, then your kid can't go to the right school. Now, if their whole education system's been downgraded, do you think tenants want to live there? Or certainly the type of tenants you want to deal with? Yes or no? No? Yes? Okay, so my good friend, the class clown, is most South Africans that are investing in Atlanta right now are investing in Clayton County. Why? Because on a piece of paper, you can buy the price cheap, the rents look good, and it all looks great. Yep.
Your schooling rating in America goes from 1 to 10. Which is good, 1 or 10?
Who's doing that grade?
Well, the schools are just rated.
You have websites that will aggregate rents like that, and it's rated differently. We have in the United States, you have A, B, C, D is what you'll have in most places. A is your best, B is, well, A and B is where I would let my kid go. C school, I'm starting to look for other places, other options, and then you have D. But every year it changes too for that school. So you can look at the track record of a school and see if it was A 2009, it might have been B 2010, and so forth. Does that answer your question? And then there are websites that will grade it 1 through 10, but the way they aggregate data is not completely accurate.
You see, misunderstand, if you go over to even Atlanta, none of us, we could go live there for 6 months, we wouldn't learn this. And literally, it blows me away. You go down a road, and on the left-hand side of the road, your kid can go to the right school, and on the right-hand side of the road, your kid can't go to the right school. And with all due respect, does the estate agent want to sell you the house on the left-hand side of the road or the right-hand side of the road? Because you don't know that stuff. So, this stuff's critical to know the fundamentals behind it,
Is America the same as here? A public school is not as prestigious as a private school?
No. That's my personal opinion. And if you talk to a lot of private schools, some people would even tell you that there's bigger drug problems in private schools. It's just white-collar stuff. Yeah. Yeah, so. Yeah. You see coke instead of marijuana. That's the difference. Or crystal meth. I wouldn't be able to tell you. So, so Clayton County and DeKalb County, places you want to stay away from. So that generally leaves the rest of Clayton and DeKalb, D-E-K-A-L-B. Those are 2 areas we don't like. And then you look at the other areas, and that's where you have good suburbs. You have working class neighborhoods where the incomes are anywhere from 3 to 4 times what we're asking for in rent. And a lot of those homeowners work and live in their respective suburbs, not in the middle of the city. But we're typically anywhere from 15 to 30 miles, 35 miles at the top, away from the central business district of Atlanta. So all the pictures that you're going to see here are actual houses that our investors have purchased in the past. And what's interesting about these houses is people share these pictures. It's not like a house that you bought. Scott mentioned houses that you can buy for $40,000, $50,000 in Clayton County that may or may not be new. But these are pictures that you share with your friends, your family. I mean, they make you proud to own. And they, a lot of times, are nicer than houses. I mean, a lot of these houses are bigger than my personal residence in Orlando. So we have single-family homes. Our criteria is minimum 3-bedroom, 2-bath. We don't buy anything older that's 1990 because we don't want any maintenance surprises in the future. They're owner-occupied neighborhoods. So all of our neighborhoods, this is really important. All of our neighborhoods, we're looking for more owners than renters because that equals better growth potential. We key this one term in the US for what I call trash flow neighborhoods or forever rental neighborhoods. If growth is important to you, then you want to stay away from those neighborhoods. And we do, because we want to see some upside. And then one of the subjective criteria we have is we stay away from houses. When it comes to, remember, we're beginning with the exit strategy, right? So we're staying away from neighborhoods where you have, or houses rather, where there might be a population out there that doesn't want to buy it for whatever reason. So is there anybody that is afraid of power lines? I don't know if that's a scare here. Like, you don't buy power lines, right? What if there was a house with a really dysfunctional floor plan, just didn't flow well? We'll stay away from those houses. Or if it's got a really small kitchen relative to kitchens you can buy in the same price category, we stay away from those. If the backyard is sloped very steeply and it's not practical to play catch with your kid or play with a soccer ball, then we'll stay away from those houses too. So we're keeping in mind the exit strategy. How easy is it going to be to liquidate the house? You're already playing, when you're playing with single family homes, it's the most liquid real estate of all the classes in the US. But then if you're also considering that you want something that's generally appealing to everybody out there, then that's just another checkbox we want on our criteria. And then of course we're looking for a good price per foot. In Atlanta, when you're playing between the 100,000 and 130 range, you're typically getting the highest yield for the least amount of risk and the least amount of hassles. You don't want to get phone calls from your property manager on a Saturday afternoon from a few thousand miles away. So that's the magic sweet spot that we're playing in. If you go higher than that, your yields are going to drop off a cliff because the rents don't follow the purchase price. If you go lower than that, then you get good paper returns, but you have a lot of hassles and uncertainty. And I'll give you an example. There was an investor from the UK who bought a house against my advice. He was looking at our competition. There was a $50,000 home in Clayton County that looked exactly, same square footage, same house, looked exactly like one of our houses that we were offering for $85,000. And this is a little while ago. The $50,000 house had a 15% net return, which is what? Annually. How much money is 15% of $50,000? $7,500, right? That's a 15% paper return. That's what he saw, that's what he bought. It was a cheaper house. And so 6 months goes by, I get a phone call from him, and he's asking me to go look at the house because he got a $3,000 bill from the property manager, and the property manager said the tenant left, just arbitrarily left. And you can chase that, but it's going to cost you more to get your money. It's better just to cut your losses and get someone else in there. So I go by the house. There was $3,000 worth of damage on the property, and he was out of pocket 2 months' rent at $800 while we rehabbed it, fixed it up, and put a new tenant in there. And that was the company he was with, because I wasn't going to touch it. We weren't going to manage a house like that. So take 2 months' rent, $1,600 plus the $3,000 on the renovation. That's $4,600 off of his bottom line. So now you're down to what, a 5–6% net? So what would you rather have? Pay a little bit more money, have some growth potential, not have the phone call, have the consistent cash flow at maybe 2 or 3 points higher than that, or you want to play with a paper return at 15–16% and then have to deal with the hassles and ultimately end up with less anyway. And I'm not saying that can't work for you, but it's not the most practical thing to do when you're a few thousand miles away, okay? I don't even like doing that in my market. My mom loves those neighborhoods, but she likes managing her own houses. I'm not going to play there even in my own backyard. So let's talk about some of the houses. This is what you're buying in Atlanta. Houses that look very similar to your homes that you would probably want to live in, and that's the feedback we get from all of our buyers when they come through. If you haven't been, come out and see us in May, and you're going to see the insides of these houses. They're beautiful. We install upgraded carpet. We use upgraded padding. We don't do the bare minimum, which is typical with rental homes. We, again, use the same paint in all our houses. We acid wash the garage floors. We put a $50 gallon epoxy paint on the garage just to make them pop. We paint the interior of the garages to match the same as the interior of the house. Silent garage door openers, upgraded ceiling fans, upgraded faucet fixtures. If we have to replace the countertops, we're using granite. If we don't have to replace them, we'll just keep them at the Formica. So that gives you an idea of what you're walking into in these homes. They look like brand new homes. So when we find a tenant, we're attracting the tenant that's going to pay a little bit more, not the one that's going to try to negotiate $50 to $100 off. Because if they try to rent our house, we just tell them this isn't the house for you. And that gives you an idea of the type of tenant we're dealing with here. So they're renting these houses at the top of the market in their neighborhoods. And we're sustaining that amount for the three-year term.
Just 3 quick things there. Firstly, when we were doing the video, Brendan wasn't with me in February because his wife was due in literally 3 weeks. And I was taking a video, and Bev was walking behind, and she'd been to Brendan's house in Johannesburg, and she was like, wow, this house is much nicer than Brendan's house in Joburg. And I was like, should we better not give that to his wife back home? But so that was the one thing, and it pretty much backs up what John's saying, just in terms of the size and the quality. You know, coming back to what I said, in London and Sydney, it's not what we used to. 3 out of 10 people on the buyer's trip, although we never advocate, which John's already said, buying a home that you could possibly, you know, that you want to live in, but 3 out of 10 people actually chose a property that was an investment, but should the shit hit the fan, they're quite happy to live in it. Does that make sense? You know, and the third thing that I thought would be pretty interesting is that we had one client of ours where they actually phoned up and they said, listen, we want to put wooden fences in. It's going to cost about $3,000. It wasn't you, Kurt, was it? No. And anyway, and literally, you know, the tenant's saying, can I spend $3,000 to put it up? That's just the kind of mindset of the kind of tenants you're getting because of the lease option in terms of where they are. We had another example where we actually met one of the tenants and we said, well, why did you rent this house? And he said, well, there's actually a 5-bedroom home down the road that was obviously bigger because this was a 4-bedroom home. But she said the quality of the finishes, the flooring, the carpets, everything else, like I just wanted to live. And she actually said to us, quite funny, she wouldn't leave the house until they'd sign up her on the lease and everything else. So it's just trying to give you, these are personal stories of mine, literally from what we've experienced on the ground there. And in terms of that quality, it does pay long term, you know.
John, can I ask a question? Do you have the same kind of apartment here in they call rent, pay more rental than like a third of your income?
No, we don't have any requirements. Nope. Yeah, we will look at their incomes and see if that's sustainable or not. I don't care how much they like the house. If they can't afford it, we won't. But yeah, you have some really good questions. But we'll talk offline because I know we're like, is this okay, guys? I know I'm running a little bit behind. Is this good stuff? I want to make sure we're adding value, okay? So we have a $116,000 house here, $844 net cash flow. When I talk yields, by the way, I'm always talking net yields. This is what you get in your pocket, okay? The net annual return is about 8.7% on your money. This home here, I think has been purchased. It's one of the bigger houses. They added and it's in an outstanding neighborhood. They added another bedroom. We'll do this sometimes. We'll add another bedroom if we see extra space that we can finish that out. For example, if the basement was unfinished, we'll make it much more appealing and give it much more growth potential by finishing the basement and adding a bedroom or two and adding a bath down there. And that's what we did with this house. 1 extra bathroom, 1 extra bedroom. This one's $120,955 a month net cash flow at 9.5% net return. Here's another one. This was sold before I even landed. $106,000. Monthly cash flow, $800 a month. Yield is 9.1%. And we have a problem in Atlanta. We have more buyers than we have properties. I mean, this is outside of just the general public. I'm talking about past buyers. And probably the biggest testament that I'm most proud of our operation in Atlanta is more than half of our individual purchases are to investors who've already bought with us in the past. And they're coming back to add more, or they have a friend or relative or a coworker that's buying with us. I can't tell you a better testament to what we're doing than probably that. They've met Anthony, they've collected their rents, they've seen their monthly statements, they've already been through the process, they're just adding more. So let me give you an idea of what's happening in the United States. How many of your friends would say that, if you were to poll your friends right now, how many of them would say that in the US right now, there is an oversaturation of supply and buyers are in control? How many of your friends might say that? Okay, how many of your friends probably realize that there's a supply issue and that sellers are in control right now? And the rest of us, we maybe just don't know. Okay, we just don't know. That's fair. Okay, so here's what's happening in the US. The fastest way to determine, I'll tell you very quickly, if you have prices going up and a supply problem, if it's a buyer's market or if it's a seller's market. In 5 minutes, if you have a local real estate agent, you can do this litmus test. You set your physical criteria. You already know what we're looking for. Based on that criteria, we have our geographic criteria as well. What's available right now? When I left, there was 580 homes available that met the criteria we're looking for. That's what's available. Now you have to know how many are selling every month to determine what our supply is. In the last 6 months, just over 2,400 of those type homes were sold in our market. That means that they're selling about 400 per month. And if there's 580 available now, and we don't add one more house to the inventory, then there's only about a month and a half, 6 weeks of supply. That's a completely different story than when I first got to the Atlanta market and there was 15 months of supply in that market. You see the difference? There's a huge difference. It requires relationships now with asset managers, with listing agents who get bank-owned properties, or else you're going to be out there with the Brendan stories, banging your head against the wall, making over list price offers and not getting them. And there's some really creative things that we do to get pole position on our acquisitions for our investors. So what a buyer's market or a seller's market looks like now is that the prices are climbing, multiple offers are coming in. Brendan mentioned the highest and best scenario. I've seen even an extreme of that where multiple offers came in. The listing agent said, send all these offers back to the buyers, send us your highest and best. They would come in, the highest and best, on the second round, and they would do it again. They would say, we want your highest and best one more time. It would piss off a couple people. They just wouldn't play the third round, but then they'd come back and they'd ultimately get a higher price for their sellers. That's the kind of stuff that's happening right now. Scott may have mentioned the auction that we went to in Atlanta, where we bought 16 houses. Last Tuesday, the first Tuesday of the month, it wasn't this last Tuesday, but the first Tuesday of the month, last month I was at the auctions, we bought 2 houses. So if you're trying to compete at the public channels where these institutions are playing, then it's very, very competitive because they're yield driven. They don't care what the 10 houses on the street sold for to the left and right of the house you're pursuing. That's what we're looking at, right? That's kind of like your residential buying logic. They're looking at what the cap rate's going to do on the house, and that's what's driving their price. So they're going to outbid you every time. So what's happening, this is some news. We'll go over this very quickly. This is some testimony from a local guy who's been buying in Atlanta forever at the auctions. He says if you try to go head-to-head with these funds, they're going to outbid you every time. One of the times I was trying to compete for our property, we knew what the rehab costs were going to be. We knew what the yields were on the property. Our stop price was $85,000. I'm sitting there bidding for this house. 3 other people representing institutions that are getting paid $10 an hour to bid for these institutions are bidding me out. They go to 85, I step back. They keep fighting for it. It ends up selling for $120,000. That's before the rehab was even done or title was even cleaned up. Wall Street Journal, $114 billion fund just committed $30 billion to buy residential houses. Colony, that's another company that buys houses. They're buying 4,500 houses in 6 different states, $1.5 billion. And what's happening now is when you start to see housing starts, a housing start is when a builder goes to the county to get a permit to build a house. Again, remember their delivery price is about $100 a foot. Why would you do that if you didn't think you could sell the house? So you're starting to see that gap closing between resale price per square foot and new construction price. When that gap closes and we reach that 5 to 6% cap rate region, then the opportunities have dried up. With the price properties we're looking for under $150,000. So here's what's fueling everything. You might have heard the expression, a person that knows the why gets a lot further than the person who just knows what to do, right? Here's the why behind everything. Here's what's driving the whole market, and it's going to create a very unique opportunity for our investors. And we're actually really excited about it. So you have on Wall Street, if you're trying to place billions of dollars, because you represent a teacher's pension fund or you represent an insurance company and you have their cash and you need a good, safe return, the more money you have, the harder it is to place. Everybody knows that, right, in the financial world. So if you can find a 5% return on your money, you're going to gravitate to something that's seasoned, that's safe, that's at a good 5%. So there are those buyers out there. There's that audience out there. What these hedge funds and private equity firms are trying to do, at least the big ones, they're trying to cater to that audience. That's their buyer later. So what they do now is they'll buy this house here for $100,000 with a net income of $7,500. And remember, their net income is based on expenses that are probably double our expenses because they're a lot less efficient. They have to buy management companies, they have to buy rehab teams, they have a lot more overhead, a lot more layers of compensation. So their net $7,500 is 7.5% on what they paid. Now, if you've ever bought and sold commercial property before, you buy the property at one price, you add value, you increase the occupancy, you increase the income on the property, then you revalue the property at the same cap rate and you can sell it for more money later. What they're doing is taking all these houses, 5,000 or 6,000 houses in 6 different states, for example, That example times 6,000, and then they're going to revalue it later. So that same house packaged for that audience that wants a 5% return is now worth $150,000 with the same income. Does that make sense? So if I have 6,000 houses like that, I just made 50% on my money times 6,000 houses. It's pretty incredible. So that's bad if you're watching the market from the sideline and you want to get in, because it makes it very difficult to play. But if you're already in the game, it's a fun ride because we're just hanging on their coattails. So here's the opportunity, kind of appropriate being in South Africa. A pilot fish, yeah, we're not the shark. The shark is those hedge funds, those private equity firms. They're out there buying everything. What we are is that little pilot fish getting a free lunch every time it finds a meal. And so we're just kind of hanging on for the ride. Let them keep, the prices are going to keep going up until they can't get their 7.5% anymore. Does that make sense? So it's about the most sure way to know that you're going to have capital growth on your property. In the meantime, I'll just collect my 8 to 10% net on a really nice house in an owner-occupied neighborhood on a 3-year lease, and then I'll just wait until we get to that 7.5% limit. One of my commercial investors taught me one of the most important lessons in my life. He was a mentor of mine. He said that, John, when I park my money someplace into a real estate project, I'm not going to plant seeds and then hope it rains to make money. I'm going to only invest if I can install an irrigation system to make it rain. And when you're investing in the US and you're playing off of these hedge funds, it's essentially like your irrigation system. It's making the market go up. So I can't guarantee anything. I don't have a crystal ball. But if you see the logic behind all of this, it's about a 90% plus accuracy rate that you're going to have really good growth potential if you're in a market where these hedge funds are playing. And now we know why that happens. So their exit is about 1.5 years, 2 years. You're not going to see a lot of houses go on the market. They're not selling them. They're aggregating all the rents, turning it into a paper investment that can be bought on Wall Street. So you're not going to see a flood of houses come on the market. It's just staying in that aggregate. Does that make sense? So how do you play with properties in Atlanta? If you try to go out there on your own, it's very hard. You can't do it on the public channels. And I say can't. You could probably do it if you're on the ground, but it's very, very difficult. It's hard enough to get an estate agent to answer your phone call because there are just way too many buyers out there. It used to mean something when you could drop a letter of intent on their desk and a proof of funds with $1 million in the account and say, hey, I want to buy some single-family homes. That used to get their attention. Everybody and their mom is doing that right now. That doesn't mean anything to me. So we know bankruptcy attorneys. We get access to houses that way. Tenant referrals. When you're managing 350 properties, you tend to kind of have a network of relationships of people who are underwater on their houses that we can potentially buy from. Asset managers that we have relationships with, they get us first look at all their property because they know, number one, that we do our due diligence in 5 days. We know the market. We're not like an end user buyer. And we've also performed with them before. So if I'm a listing agent representing a seller of distressed properties, what's my goal? I want to net them as much money as possible, and I want a fast closing. And that's what we bring to the table. And so to piggyback on what Ryan might have said earlier, it's a system that you're plugging into. There are efficiencies in here that you can play with as a collective community that you can't do as an individual because of things like this. Title companies, builders, community association managers equivalent to the people that run your body corporates. They tell us where the deals are. So we provide all of that with the whole turnkey system again. And the only advice I'd have to say, I have a video report in your Atlanta folder called The 5 Biggest Mistakes That Investors Are Making Today. The number one most expensive mistake is missed opportunity. It's because there's a lot of people out there that are kind of in a permanent holding pattern. They ask lots of questions, and then a year goes by, and I still see them on the sideline not taking advantage of what's been happening with the market. And the window's shutting. This isn't just some urgency thing. It truly is shutting. I don't see us playing in Atlanta for more than 6 to 8 more months. So if that's the market that you want to play in and you want the safety of that model, then it could be an opportunity for you. I would say that, you know, if I was sitting in your chair right now, I would be pretty scared. I mean, first of all, your political climate and your economic climate here, there's a difference between having a problem and being in a predicament. See, a problem, you can look at alternatives and have fixes for. You can have solutions to problems. A predicament is just kind of a shitty situation. You don't know where it's going to go. And you have to have, like Scott was saying, scenario options, a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C. So this could be a good plan A or a plan B or a plan C for you. But I would just say, whatever you do, whether it's with IPS or someone else, just do your due diligence, take steps to learn whatever you have to learn and be comfortable. And I can say that we have aligned with a group that we feel has a good soul, and they're not going to run from phone calls. They'll actually take care of our owners. And nothing's going to be perfect, but it's the best group I've seen. I see IPS as a leader in the industry that can take a community with a sustainable model to profit in the United States, not just in this climate right now, but in commercial and residential real estate long term. So that's really what you're plugging into. Okay. So that's pretty much all I have to say. Thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, John.